There are exactly 168 hours in a week. I spent 32 of them watching a machine manufacture useless plastic trash, 3 days filling cracks in brittle resin, and a day questioning my sanity because a USB port decided to go to sleep. All of this just to build a tiny glowing liquid hot underworld with sound. And it was absolutely worth it. Let me show you how I did it. The plan was simple. Print the Gothic throne, the base and the hellhounds and hollow out for the hardware. My usual go-to would be resin, but I felt adventurous. 16 hours of print. What could possibly go wrong? Here's a little lesson for you about 3D printing. The print is weakest along the layer lines. This means that every single pointy thing is very fragile. I know this, but I decided that I wanted to try and print this whole base flat. So with a little bit of filler to hide the worst layer lines, it was time to take away the support material. How many times did I break a point? Take your guess. More than I like to admit, I think I glued them back 10 to 15 times before I managed to not break any more tips. But now is the problem. How am I going to make a hole in the bottom? With a Dremel? This was the point where I decided that the best solution was actually resin after all. Speaking of poor choices, before the music career took off, Ozzy tried his hand at burglary. He wanted to be smart and avoid leaving fingerprints, so he put on gloves. The problem was that he accidentally chose fingerless gloves. He left perfect, clear fingerprints all over the shop and spent 6 weeks in prison. Ha! I wonder how drunk he was. Now is the question, how do all these pieces fit with each other? I'm pretty sure there's something about that in here. Yes, here it is. This doohickey is this part right here that fits with this one. This thingamabob over here is obviously this spiky part in the front. It's all coming together. This is going here. Jam this part over here. And here it is, just as in the picture. And now it's just a matter of gluing everything together. Ah, come on! I glued them upside down. Oh, now it won't fit anything. Well, I guess it's an upside down base now. Here's a little trick I learned while I was hunting butterflies in the desert. If you have 9 pieces glued together, you can make the famous 180-degree structural realignment. Look how efficient that is. The most boring job of the whole build makes me think of Ozzy's so-called career path before Black Sabbath. He dropped out of school at 15 and bounced around terrible jobs. His weirdest gig was at a car factory. His official title? Car horn tuner. He sat there all day, tuning car horns to the exact right pitch. With that in mind, I think I actually prefer filling gaps. After a day or two when the filler had hardened and I'd sanded the whole thing, it was time for the Dremel to make a hole for the electronics that come later. What a nice sound, isn't it? Just kidding. I'll spare your ears and play some sweet rock. About here is when I realized that the walls are very thin and I took it slow. But holy shit, they are paper thin. And obviously I cracked it. Am I going to try to save it, or is this also just a pile of garbage now? Third time's the farm, or whatever that expression is. Let's forget every problem I had with the first base and print this again, but now with a hole from the start. No wonder why these take like 16 hours. I'm sick of this base now. Let's move on to something funnier, the hellhounds and some wiring. The concept art of this diorama has some fire-breathing hellhounds, and I thought that looked really cool. But how does one imitate fire? I have these flickering LEDs, and I want to put them in the mouths of the hounds to make that effect. The round tip of the LED concentrates the light, and I don't want that. So I did what I do every time I don't like something, cut it off. And now it scatters the light exactly as I wanted. Let's see how it looks inside of the mouths. That's going to look really nice in the end. I will also sync them to the sound of Crazy Train later in the video, so be sure to stick around for that part too. I glue the LEDs in place and run wires through the bodies so they can be picked up in the electronics department later. I drilled holes in the base as well as I could to hide the cables. Before I get to the painting, I want to add some electronics. Since I've never used a speaker in any of my dioramas, I had no idea how I would do it, but it was easier than expected. First off, I take my newly designed PCB, which I ordered from PCBway. If you ever want to make small or big projects with electronics or perhaps bigger prints than what your 3D printer can handle, you definitely want to check out PCBway. They can make everything from PCBs to injection molding to 3D prints in a huge variety of materials. I have had such a great experience ordering from them, and the product always delivers with very high quality. So whatever you need for your next project, head over to their site and see what they can do for you. The link is in the description. I reimagined my PCB to be more of a hub for smaller modules like lights, motors, speakers and screens. I'm still in the process of making the modules, as you will see later. The point of making this hub as modular as possible is so I don't have to waste components that I won't use. Every diorama and project needs different stuff, so this will make it so much better in upcoming builds. Speaking of small components, did you know that in 2010 Ozzy became one of the first people in the world to have his entire DNA sequenced by genetics company Gnome Inc. The researchers wanted to find out how his body had survived decades of extreme substance abuse. They found several unique gene mutations that had never been seen before, including the ADH4 gene, which controls how the liver breaks down alcohol, which gave him an almost superhuman tolerance. But the most ironic finding was that his genome showed that he is genetically hypersensitive to caffeine. The researchers bluntly stated that Ozzy's true kryptonite is just regular coffee. To control the small speaker, I used a DF player connected to the hub. These are some well-documented small MP3 modules that work great for my project. Let's connect everything and see if this works and if this video gets demonetized. Oh yeah! This shit rocks! Now that I know this works, I need to make some speaker holes under his big throne. Otherwise, this tiny speaker won't impress anyone. And that little problem is solved using a drill. Everything gets glued down and wired under the base in wait for the hellhounds. When I first saw this model, I thought that the black stuff in the rendering pictures would look so much better as lava, so that the hellhounds literally come up from the depth of hell. So let's paint that! I start off by painting the whole base white as a base coat, to make sure to blind the camera as much as I could. Then add bright yellow in the deepest crevices. After that, it's just a matter of filling in the rest with orange and trying not to cover the yellow too much, just a little wet blending. I'm going back with the yellow to paint over the seams and blend them to make it look floaty and not so sharp. That's a pretty decent base color. Now to really make it look like lava, we need contrast. I'm going over the whole base with a dark red dry brush to paint the tips, to make it look like it's cooling down the further away it gets. But we're not done yet. The very edges get a coating of black. And then I go back with yet another layer of yellow to crank up the contrast even more. The plan was that the throne should sit on some sort of platform, and what makes a better platform than lava stones? To make the lava stones, I use cork. I slaughtered some old wine corks I got from my dad. Thank you, Dad. Then I ripped them apart to make the right texture on the edges, so they looked more like stones. And now it's just a matter of placing everything to see where I should glue them without colliding with anything else. Speaking of colliding, everyone has probably heard about Ozzy biting the head off a bat, but that wasn't the only animal he decapitated. The year was 1981. Ozzy had just launched his solo career and was attending a high-powered corporate boardroom meeting with the executives at CBS Records in Los Angeles. To help charm the stiff suit-wearing executives, Sharon had a wholesome PR stunt planned. Ozzy was supposed to pull live white doves from his coat pockets and release them into the air as a beautiful symbol of peace. The problem was, Ozzy showed up completely hammered. As a PR manager started giving a long, incredibly boring corporate speech, Ozzy grew restless. To shut her up, he walked over and sat directly on her lap. He pulled out the trained dove, and as the dove landed on his lap, he bit its head clean off, spitting the bloody bird head right onto the boardroom table. As the room erupted into absolute panic and people started screaming, they both got kicked out and both were hysterically laughing while waiting for a taxi. Pretty crazy turn of events. They were both banned from the studio a long time after that, but you know how corporates change their minds when money gets involved. As Ozzy started to generate a huge amount of money, they lifted the ban. So, while I'm sitting here under regular workshop lights, carefully layering shades of red and orange to build a tiny fictional hellscape, just remember that the guy sitting on the throne didn't need special effects. He was just genuinely aggressively unhinged. Well, back to the base. I still thought that I needed more contrast, so I added some very light yellow, and then glazed everything together using a yellow speed paint. I like the wet look, so why not add some glossy varnish on everything? But the stones should not be glossy, so let's dab some matte varnish there. And that's the lava base done. The hellhounds get pretty much the same treatment as the base, so let's just paint Mochi, Max, Bailey and Rocky and get on with it. Now that the lava pool is finished, and before I let the Prince of Darkness take his seat, we need to make sure the fires of hell are actually burning. It's time to move from the paintbrush to the soldering iron, because nothing ruins a rock god's entrance like bad lights. To make the lights sync up to the intro of Crazy Train, I first need to separate all the positive cables from the negative and also solder resistors to all 4 of them so they don't burn up in the middle of the rock concert. Don't forget to put on safety glasses before playing with the soldering iron. Since my module cards isn't finished yet, it has to be a little backyard engineering on this one. I solder a wire to a transistor, which works kind of like a button. When the transistor gets voltage from the hub, it will open and let current go through and make the LED light. This also needs a resistor so it won't overload the chip. I've designed this hub so that the microcontroller is only controlling parts and never actually powering them, to minimize the stress on the board. The power comes directly from the batteries. Now that we have a transistor and a resistor, let's connect every negative cable to the transistor's leg, called the emitter. Connect every positive LED cable to the battery and the leg base to the microcontroller. The leg collector on the transistor goes directly to ground. Was that too fast? No worries. You can always join the Discord and ask me again what the hell I'm doing so I can explain better. Now, without even testing anything, I glue everything down so I don't have any loose cables. Onwards to the code!
Come on!
What the heck did I do wrong now? Let's control the connections, just to see that everything still works, and that I didn't burn the transistor when I soldered. If it beeps, it's still good. Okay, so nothing wrong there. So why is it that it gets an error when I try to upload the code? I did a little bit of research and found out that I may have been stupid and short-circuited the USB, but it was more likely a solar flare that did it. Let's go with that. So, after restarting the computer, I shielded myself with aerospace-grade aluminum and tried again. Yes! It works! If you want the code, it's in the Discord. Link down below. Now that I know this should work and I get power to the lights, let's focus on the star himself. Me? No, wait, I meant Ozzy. The skin tone is a mix of basic skin tone and brown rose from Vallejo to get a decent base color. I paint the face and the hands with that color. Don't mind the big patch on his back. No further questions, please. One downside to resin is that it can warp pretty badly, as you can see here. There is no way I can bend back this. So I decided that I should cut it off and replace it with a steel wire from an old drying rack I had laying around. You really never know when weird old shit like this can be exactly what you need. With a little bit of modifying and a little bit of filing, we are back in the game. Ozzy gets highlights with only basic skin tone and then a wash of blue, red and yellow washes to mix the skin and make it look more natural, because lighter skin tones actually have much greener tones in real life than we realize. So it's just a matter of covering everything and then dabbing away with a sponge. This way, it's easy to glaze more red if the tone looks a little dead, or more blue if the tone is way too red or yellow. I finished the skin tone with dry red watercolor, just to hint at some red cheeks and some red knuckles. We can't forget the glasses. I want the eyes to kind of show through but still have that purple tint. So, with a steady hand and absolutely not dropping them, I painted the glasses and the frames and glued them in place. And I think that is it. Let's go to the Glamour Shots. Set the mood, please, and drum rolls. Unfortunately, YouTube didn't like me using this audio. I want to thank my patrons. You are the reason I could afford a speaker for this diorama. If you want more behind the scenes content or just like what I do, you could also join Patreon if you want. Here's another video YouTube thinks you will like. Stay creative!